I have lost my Minecraft, and instead of being super sad and crying about it, I saw it as an opportunity to create a new one, take my building to the next level and create a fantasy world I've always wanted. And to do you one better, I'm taking you guys with me on the adventure. So here we are with the first 1,000+ days in this brand new world where everything is about building. And since there's no time to waste, I've made my way over to these little islands here, since they're pretty much the perfect place for a starter base. So with some time, we'll surely transform them into something great. But for now, I don't really have an exact plan for them, so we'll see. All the building is for later though, since for now, I've only done the most basic stuff. Like, I've started off looting some shipwrecks, getting some tools, and putting a couple of chests down over here. Also can't forget crafting some iron armor. I mean, don't really want to die on the first day. Got some diamonds as well, and in the end enchanted a bit, because in order to build, we have to farm quite some resources. Considering the starter base inflation, we'll have to farm quite a lot, which means it will take quite some time. Which means it's time to go on a little farming trip. So we'll go further north onto a little boat trip to get all the natural blocks at first that we need for terraforming, since we're building on the little islands and we do have to terraform everything by hand. So natural blocks first, and then we're gonna see what else we need. So with all the materials gathered for the terraforming and some additional off-stream gathering, as you can tell, we got all the materials that we need for the entire build. Before we start terraforming though, we're gonna craft some diamond armor and place the last few copper trapdoors because they have to age. And with all of them in place, it should be pretty much fine now, and we should have all the copper stuff finally done, which means we can get over to terraforming and basically flattening out the entire islands over here, make space for our own custom terrain of our build. So we're actually gonna stay in the same theme as the last world, so we will be building quite a bunch of ancient ruins again, as well as mystical places, and of course we will make it all overgrown. For today's episode, I've come up with a little custom island design, as you can already tell, and we will put a little sanctuary on top of the island, as well as some stone henges with a broken bridge that might or might not connect to the other island on the other side at some point. We'll see. Enough yapping though, it's actually time to build finally. With the terrain more or less established now, and the little docks built over here, it actually starts to look like something. Don't get me wrong, there's still a lot to do, and there's an entire build missing basically. but we can see it come together more or less in terms of the terrain, at least. If we ignore the entire hole at the top. For the moment, we're still having the storage, the chests over here, since I was too lazy to move them yet, since we will have to build the storage system at first, and after we can move it over there, so don't worry about the little chests over here. The detailing of the terrain is obviously not done for now. I just laid out the little sketch, more or less, the rough parts. We still have to do the underwater parts as well, so there's still a lot to do, but for now we get over to the actual building part where we build the actual build. I had some sort of tower in mind with a broken bridge going over to that island, which we might transform in the future, but for now I'd say we get into building actual build this video. I think that's it now. We actually do have the schematic in place, of the first version of the build at least. But there's still quite a bunch missing. Some minor and some larger details actually. It's not fully done yet, but it looks a lot better now having the build in place. It actually turned out quite alright, I'd say. I really like how this turned out over here, the little Elytra. We might have to put a book in here. I'm not too sure about lighting up the candles, so they glow at night and it's darker. But I feel like with the firefly bushes and floating candles, it looks quite nice, I'd say. It's not fully done yet. Like as said, we still have quite some around here because there's like some missing blocks, some missing pieces all around, and we haven't done the transition from water to land yet. On the other hand, there's also mob proofing, which is also missing. But I feel like we can get straight back to building and fix up all the little things that are still missing to actually finish the first version of this build, because I'm not sure if I want to have sand all over here and down here, so we might have to remove all of that and just fix up everything basically. all the little pieces, you know. So I'd say we get straight back to building to fix up all the little mistakes and do the actual detailing of the build. So we do have most of the transitioning underwater done now. There's still some sand and it could be deeper, but I want to get the build done today, so we're gonna leave it as it is for now and head over to the mob proving part, which basically just means placing torches under moss carpets, for which I installed a little mod to check where mobs can still spawn basically. And after that, I just used some bone meal to create some grass around where we needed some more foliage because it was quite empty. And our entire theme is basically overgrown, so I'd say grass was definitely needed basically everywhere. And after all that bone mealing, there was one last thing to do, which was the interior. Because one, I didn't do one part of the interior at all, and two, the life is missing. There's no actual detail and it's not really as overgrown yet on the inside. So we gotta do it now and make this place basically come to life. I feel like that will do quite fine, especially with the vines cut down and strings in place. Everything does look a lot better. The storage system, we have 3 little places with chests, And additionally, I added a little cave entrance from, not sure if we can call it a lush cave, but you have some little place down here that you've already seen. It's especially nice at night with the firefly bushes over here, no berries. And with all of that in place, we do have the entire storage room pretty much done. There's only the books that are missing in the desert bookshelves basically. But aside of that, we can basically only add like some smaller details in the future eventually. But for now, it's pretty much good. Coming to the main tower, I also added a bunch of vines and leaves over here. We do have some hanging bookshelves from the ceiling, since at the top of the build we do have our little enchanting table room, which basically is a library. So I feel like hanging bookshelves from the ceiling, they just add a bunch to the atmosphere, as well as the lecterns, and I feel like candles work so well in libraries. It just add a lot to the atmosphere. Additionally, I added a little chandelier up here, just a little basic one. And coming up here, we have our little enchanting table room, where I decided to put another bunch of floating candles in the air and some sort of crystal, which is supposed to contain some kind of magic or mystical energy, since the world is supposed to be quite lore heavy and we do have some magic around. I just felt like it fits quite well together with the enchanting table, since enchantments might be magic related in this world, who knows. Aside of the crystal and the floating cannons, we also do have some crying obsidian up there, which just adds a few more particles that I felt like was kinda needed, especially at night, together with the firefly bushes in the walls and below. It does definitely add a bit to it, I'd say. Instead of all the magic related things, we obviously do have a bunch of vines and leaves again to make everything a bit overgrown. just slightly. And of course the bookshelves on each of the columns basically. Some higher, some on like some columns there's more, and on some there's obviously less. On the other hand, the top part of the build is supposed to be decaying, so there's a lot of parts missing in the columns, and the very top part of the tower is basically missing completely. Since with time and a bunch of nature, buildings eventually fall apart or break down, decay as already mentioned, which is basically why I designed the top floor up here as if it's slowly collapsing and falling apart. And after cutting down a couple more vines, this was actually a bit too much, it does look already a bit better, and I'm quite happy with how it turned out up here. Aside of that, I mainly used stone-ish blocks for most of the build. We do have some copper elements, obviously, a bunch of moss, hail moss, and a few other blocks. I decided to go with a little fade from dark tones at the bottom to lighter tones at the top, like diorite, starting from deepslate, as you can see, mainly because at the top buildings do seem in general just a bit brighter due to the skylight, sunlight, and the human eye, which makes things that are further away from you seem a bit brighter. So for the texturing and shading, I used quite a bunch of coal ore to have this transition from deepslate to normal grayish stone blocks, or to smooth stone. Then in the end we have the diorite at the top. And do you think there was only one thing left that I forgot, which is or was lighting up some candles in here, as well as putting the book and quill into the lectern and basically just enjoying the atmosphere. So for a starter build, I do think it actually turned out quite okay. It is a tiny bit large, but I thought we definitely had to create something memorable in the long run and a place where I kind of want to stay for a bit. Yeah. Over here in the Stonehenge floor, I did incorporate compass design basically. Since the world is kind of based on exploring as well, so we will explore quite a bunch of places in the long run, and I just felt like it fitted quite a bit. So yeah, that's the first version of our starter base. A few more will follow probably, since I'm not sure if we're 100% done. There's always room for improvement, so we'll see in the future. But for now, I think it turned out great. Yet there is still one huge problem, and I don't mean all the detailing that I still have to do at some point, but there is an important part of the build basically missing completely, which is why I'll be adding a second island in today's episode, together with a build on top of course, as well as connected by the broken bridge to our first island. And I already have quite some ideas in mind for today's build, which is why I'd say we'll start right away with the material gathering for the little island, since that won't take as long, since I won't be needing to gather as many resources because I still have some from the last episode luckily. So I'll just grab the only beacon that I have real quick, and then it's time for a little boat trip to a nearby island to not only stock up on natural resources like grass, dirt and stone for terraforming, but also dark oak wood as well as leaves for eventual detailing and foliage. And if you guys are wondering, I actually chose this spot to gather resources, because there's a huge lush cave below, which I might be able to use for a future build eventually. And the cave contained moss, which we definitely do need in today's episode. So after farming the last bit of moss and acacia wood, I brought back all the materials, and it actually seems like I do have all the materials that we need for the island together now, which means there's only the building part left. So I'd say we'll jump right into building the terrain of the island. That shouldn't actually take as long to build, since the island today is a bit smaller than our last one. And that should actually do for our little island. It's not as large as already mentioned, but on the other hand, we'll have quite some stuff underground, which in fact will be a dragon nest inside the underground cave that we have over here, as well as some parts of our base that might be underground. We do need quite some farms. We have literally none except a little bee farm, a honey farm, so that's definitely needed. I haven't done the transition from land to water yet. There's still quite some stuff we have to do. Detailing not done at all. But we do have quite some other priorities at the moment. Since I will have to travel quite a distance for all the materials that I need for today's build, Number one priority right now is definitely an Elytra, or multiple actually, which means I'll have to make my way to the end, eat the Ender Dragon real quick, and go to some end cities to get one or multiple Elytras. Luckily for me, I do have some Blaze Rods and some Ender Pearls, which means I can easily find my way to the fortress. And after grabbing everything needed, it's time for a small adventure now. Luckily, the fortress wasn't too far away, and it didn't actually take as long to find. That's it, I guess. Quickly beaten the Ender Dragon, and with the XP the tools are finally getting repaired as well. So let me just grab the Ender Dragon egg real quick, and after I'll just store it away safely, just in case if I were to fall into the void, which I do not hope for, but it's just a safer thing to do. But for now, it's time to get myself a couple of Elytras and enough shulker boxes to store the building materials and resources for our rather small builds. So I'm making my way to the nearest end city, which luckily only took a couple of minutes. But don't worry guys, I won't torture you with a montage of me killing hundreds of shulkers. I'll just grab the Elytra and we'll get out of here. And that concludes our end trip. And aside of 3 Elytras, we do have quite some shulkers now, which should make building and resource gathering quite a bit easier. And we can instantly use them, since resource gathering is actually what we have to do in order to continue today's build, because there's a couple of things that we're missing. So let's jump right into it. I first of all need a couple of things from the ancient city, and not just Skulk and Swift Snake. I also need a skeleton skull for some detailing. Well, that was quick. I was just applying from the warden over here, and we'll just get some Swift Snake and then we're good. Next up are the tricky trials, which are literally right next to the ancient city. And with all the copper obtained, we only need a bunch of prismarine, barkwood, and tons of other materials. And a couple hours later, and tons of crafting done. It seems like we got all the materials we need now. And with all the shulker boxes filled, there's only one thing left to do, which is building. So I'll just grab all the shulkers real quick, and let's say we go straight to building. So I'm actually pretty much done with the Dragon Cave now. Also decided to add the crystals on the outside already, as well as parts of the Dragon Egg shell close to the water over there. And aside of that, the only thing I still have to do eventually is, once the vines have grown around the cave and inside the cave, is basically cutting them down with strings. The inside is pretty much done too. I said it's basically only the vines that are missing. Decided to go with carpets for mob proving, since it's quite dark in here, and not just because of our lower brightness, but with a rather low brightness, the atmosphere just feels a lot better, in my opinion. It just has this mysterious and dark kind of touch that you just don't really have with full bright, so I pretty much prefer it this way, which is also why I cut down on light sources and basically only use a couple of candles, some sea lanterns, as well as glow lichen. But yeah, I decided to go with pillars for support and keep everything else quite naturally. And on the left side of the cave, you can see I went with quite some crystals made out of a mix of copper, bark wood, and prismarine, as well as some glass. And in front of the crystals, you can see 3 little dragon eggs, or 2.5 since one has already hatched, made out of copper or weather copper, basically to symbolize the aging effect or the state in which the eggs are in until they hatch. To create a better atmosphere, I decided to go with blackstone for the darker parts, as well as skulk, which definitely adds a lot to our already existing copper, bark wood, and prismarine mix over here for the crystals. The colors just fit so well together. Yeah, so I decided to go with it, since it adds this kind of mysterious look, this kind of mystical look, and it just adds a lot to the atmosphere. Especially once you turn on shaders, as you can see. And of course, I can't forget the little dragon skull over here, or the dragon skeleton, which I put into the floor with some glass layers. Made some kind of fog effect, make it seem as if the cave was a lot deeper than it actually is. And I just had to add dragon claw as a little detail to kind of finish it off. And of course I added quite a bunch of foliage to make this place at least a bit overgrown. It's not as much. I could have added a bunch more, but a couple of leaves and vines together with the moss kinda do the job. And I feel like it's the right amount of foliage for a cave. Yeah, that's pretty much it for the little dragon cave, and I'd say we get right to the next building part. Actually doesn't look as bad with the ruins final added. I mean, we're not done yet, but we have the main build on top of the island, basically a little Colosseum build, as well as the broken pieces in the water. The ones from the Broken Bridge as well as the one from the Colosseum. But you can still tell that there's quite a bunch to do, not just on top of the island, but also underground. So we'll get right to that part now. And that actually concludes our underground lab, which contains quite a bit from shelves on the left side to machines or actual farms for the bush, the firefly, and the wildflowers on the right side. And of course, that's not the only two things that we have in here, since I really tried to make this place quite cluttered as well as atmospheric. We only have candles and crying obsidian as well as skulk veins for light sources to make this place darker and a little bit mysterious. And to create the feeling of an actual underground lab, we have some little experiments on the shelves, like the dried ghasts over here, or the wither skeleton skull in the glass, as well as mutated plants on these shelves over here. Basically just to sell the idea that this place is all about experiments or mutations on plants and animals, for example, as well as inventions, kind of. Since the heart of this place is basically all about the invention of the Elytra over here, which has basically been invented by the people that live on these islands for the past hundreds of years. After taming and raising the dragons they found in these waters, they kinda wanted to have wings themselves, which led to this lab being created and the experiments on the wings of the fallen dragons. And that's pretty much most of this island's lore, I would say. And I'm actually pretty happy with how the lab turned out. I mean, aside of the little farms over here, it's not just technical, but the atmosphere also just turned out really great in my opinion. And detailing this place, like adding this little book about mutations over here, for example, was actually a lot of fun. But of course, we're not done yet, since the detailing on the outside is still kinda lacking. There's a bunch of foliage and color missing, which is why I'd say we get right to the detailing part on the outside. There's actually not too much left after adding leaves, vines, and flower fields, so I'm basically just adding patches of dirt, break up the green a little more, and create more color variety on the island. Besides adding all the foliage on top of the island, I thought it would be a great idea to also add some greenery in the water over here, as well as adding some driftwood that was washed ashore to create a small sense of time and liveliness. And with all the foliage in place, it creates the Oregon look I tried to go for. Makes it feel a lot more alive and populated in terms of plants. But that's it for this episode of building. All the foliage and decorations added, and leave this area over here for now. Aside of all the terrain and nature related things, the main build finally coming to life as well now. Outside of the detailing and fixed up some minor mistakes. Over here in the main room of the build, I decided to put down a heavy core as some sort of ancient relic that might have been connected to magic in some sorts. But aside of that, there's not much going on here. Finishing builds like these though is probably my favorite part about building. Especially after putting in hours and hours of work into them. Seeing your own build come to life, or your entire world come to life, just a different feeling. You just have to experience, kinda. But if I gotta be honest, I can't even really tell which part of the build my favorite is. Really laugh, but I'm not really sure. I feel like mostly all of it turned out quite good, but you guys let me know what you think of the island in the comment section. But there's sadly still a few things missing over here. So today we're not just back with these red aspen trees that I decided to add to the build to give it more life and color, but also a bunch of things to do and projects to tackle. With the main part of today's video being a dragon that I wanted to add to our little area, since we can't just build a dragon nest without a dragon, right? That doesn't work like that. Which means I somehow have to figure out how to place a dragon around here in this area, I'd say. And I gotta make it organic and somewhat natural or dynamic, because otherwise it will look way too stiff and it just won't look good. And that will be quite a challenge actually, since I've never built a dragon before or barely any organics at all. So we're gonna see how it turns out, but that's for later. Since right now we have to tackle something else. Luckily, we still got some leftovers from our second island, which means we won't have to farm as much in today's episode. But I still want to feel productive, so we'll grab some tools and a couple of shulkers and go remove quite some trees for now. Because I have a few plans for the future of the terrain surrounding our islands, so I'm removing the trees to somewhat prepare that landscape. Which luckily didn't take too long. And that pretty much concludes the tree removal process, which didn't just give us a bunch of leaves and wood over here in these strikers, but also quite a few new guests since it was Halloween yesterday. So I just grabbed the shulkers real quick since we're done with this part over here. We can move on to the next part that has to be tackled, after storing the shulkers with all the leaves and the wood away for now. And with that done, that's basically it with trees for this episode at least. And now we have to get over to another little problem that we have, since we barely have any moss left. And since you all know, we tend to build overgrown, and moss is basically a perfect material for that, right? So right now we'll have to build a little moss farm. So it's time to grab a bit of redstone and craft all the components we need for the farm. And since we already have all the materials, there was luckily no need to go farm any. And I should have everything now, if I'm not mistaken. So it's time to go next to the second island, which is where the farm is supposed to go, since I've decided to build a third island over here, after adding the moss farm, since we basically need moss to build the island, at least for a small part. So with both of the moss farms running now, we shouldn't have any future problems with moss anymore. Only negative downside to the farm is that we have to fill up the bow mill by ourselves, since the fully automated one was kind of bugged. Like, the bow mill didn't spread properly, so it just didn't work. Kinda sucks, but it's still alright. So I'll just AFK for a bit over here till we have the moss that we need, and I'll see you then. about 2 hours later, I decided to change one of the farms to pale moss, since we also need pale moss for the builds. Texturing, you know it. And we should have all the moss that we need now, actually. And that will pretty much do the job for quite a while now, I think. So we can turn these off, actually. Grab some moss and head over to the next step of today's video, which will be the island, of course. So I'll just prepare the resources real quick, since I don't think that I'll actually have to farm anything for it. And yeah, that being said, I had to farm a shulker full of coal ore, so I guess I was wrong. But we do have all the materials that we need now, so we can just grab the shulkers and go over to build the island around our new moss farm over here. And that's pretty much it with the basic stuff for this little island over here now. But there's still a bunch to do though, since the detailing is not done. We don't have the transition from water to land yet. It's basically just cut off, and the entire island just doesn't really feel alive yet, mainly due to the lack of detailing, I'd say. So it's definitely time to change that. Starting off by grabbing a couple of materials and going underwater to build the transitioning from the island to the actual Minecraft terrain. And I kid you not, it takes way longer than you think it would. And I know I said we're done with trees for this video, but they just fit too well. I just had to. And you can't stop me, so another couple of trees over here. Having the trees added just adds so much to the atmosphere in my opinion though. And right after that, even more foliage. And I'm basically just using bone meal because I'm too lazy to craft or farm all the moss carpets and grass, tall grass or whatever. And I mean, it works. I just gotta remove the parts that are too much and create some sort of balance, and then it's pretty much fine. And for the dry areas, I went with dead bushes, a leaf litter, and some spruce fences to create some shrubs or dead plants in a way, and extend the different kinds of plants around here. And on the other hand, I felt like there was something missing at the build. So I came up with the idea of a hanging bridge across the terrain over here, to create another point of interest and to make the island feel a bit more alive, as well as accessible to certain places. But I decided to keep it quite simple and just went with spruce wood and a few matching blocks. And after that, it was time to make the place a bit more overgrown. So vines it is, and not just for the terrain over here, but also for the build itself, to make it look even more decayed than it already is. And with all the vines in place, it's time to let them grow for a while. But I feel like the place is finally coming a bit together now, with the bridge and the foliage in place. So while waiting for the vines to grow, we're gonna head over to the place and light it up a bit. Together with some candles on top of lightning rods, since it's literally my favorite combination at the moment to add some light to builds. Which leaves us with one last question to answer, since there is no entrance to the moss farm yet. And since there is no good way for a staircase over here, I'd like to go with a hole in the ground kinda, that originated from the collapsed parts of the decaying building over here in this area. together with the hole, I also want to add the collapsed parts of the build to sort of tell the story to how it happened and how the hole or entrance got created. And since the moss farm is basically not the main focus of the build, it's just going to be a little side entrance. Which surprisingly didn't take too long, since it's just a little entrance to make the moss farm accessible. Lazy solutions for lazy me, what can I say? But hey, it works, so can't really complain. And we have other things to do since we're actually done with the island now. And I'd say for a simple island for a moss farm, it turned out quite good actually. And with the vines cut down in the end finally, I think we're pretty much good and can call this island finished, or at least today. Since I feel like we could maybe add something in the future to the island, maybe something in the water like docks or a ship or the boats, but there's other stuff to do now. So for now, we're moving on to the next island, which is gonna be on the opposite side of our starter base over here. So we'll just grab all the shulkers with the materials that I put together after finishing the last island, and then we head on to build another beautiful large island, which is mainly decoration and has no actual real use except for looking pretty. So I hope you guys enjoy the next little montage or time lapse or cinematic. And that's pretty much the second island of today. It's mainly for decorational purposes, which is why we won't have any buildings on it. But over here in this area, I decided to go with a couple crystals again. The same ones that we had on the second island that we've built over there. And mainly to make it a common mineral in these waters that the dragons that live here, or the dragons that we're gonna build later, need to live lore-wise. And at the same time, they just look really cool and give another point of interest, kind of. They sort of make the landscape a little more interesting and give us something to look at, basically. But there's obviously still some things that might be added in the future in this area over here. Shipwrecks or underwater plants, for example. Maybe some creatures. But that's for another video, since it's actually time for the dragon now, finally. And in the end, this island doesn't just have decorational purposes, but it also gives us the perfect angles to plan out and look at our dragon in the sky over here, which will be above the second island as well as the broken bridge, as you can see. But yeah, building a dragon will definitely not be easy, since I have barely any experience or no experience with organics at all. So it's definitely gonna be a challenge, especially in terms of the scale. I feel like we have to go for something smaller, because otherwise the scaling would be way too off, and it would just look way too huge. I feel like the main issue with getting the dragon right would be making it organic and natural in a way, since on a small scale you can't really make any good curves. Well, you can, but it most likely won't look as smooth, which will definitely be the biggest issue. But with a bit of trial and error we can definitely figure that out. But for now it's time to get the resources and then we can hop straight into building again. For the color palette, I wanted to go with a blue and black or dark grayish combination. The black and gray for the body of the dragon, and the same kind of blue that we used for the crystals, for the wings of the dragon basically, to show the correlation between them. And with all the materials together, it's only a matter of building a dragon now. When designing the dragon, I actually started off with the ribcage and went over to the hips after to figure out the rotation I wanted to have in the body of the dragon. When designing any organic build, it's best to ask how each individual parts interact or correspond to one another. And once I had the main body done, I tried to add the limbs, including the tail, to the main piece. The only question to answer when designing limbs, in my opinion, is how does this creature move? Which kind of leads us to how do the joints work. So as long as you get the joints right, you can basically adjust the length and form to your liking or to what fits best to the creature. After adding the head of the dragon, I went over to building and adjusting the wingspan until the sizing finally matched the body. And in the end I added the missing skeleton of the wings using some references to get the anatomy right. And with all that done, it was basically just filling out the wings with the gradient that I chose, and some detailing. And that's pretty much our drawing. After finishing it, I decided to also add some little birds around for the vibes, basically. And it did turn out rather small in terms of the scaling, because otherwise it would have been way too huge in comparison to the entire islands and the surroundings. And I didn't want to have it too far away, since the dragon kind of belongs to the islands. But aside of that, I feel like it turned out quite great. And I should put down some glow lichen on top of the dragon, kind of spawn proof it, since I don't want any mobs on top of it. Yeah, the only downside really is that depending on your brightness settings, you can barely see the dragon at night. It's not too bad, in my opinion. The rotation of the body in the dragon turned out almost perfect. And it really looks like the dragon is moving, which was really, really important for me. So I'm glad I was able to pull that off. I just really wanted the dragon to look dynamic and not static, which is why I put a lot of focus on that. But on the other hand, I'm totally interested in how you guys think the dragon and the islands turned out. So gladly let me know your thoughts and opinions, as well as ideas for future projects in the comments. But that's for later, because for now, we gotta leave this place for a while. Don't get me wrong, there's still a bunch I want to do in this area, but that's sadly not for now, because we have more important areas to tackle, since the lack of resources is kinda driving me insane. So there must be a plan we can come up with for a mob farm, so I don't have to spend countless nights slaying creepers anymore, right? An idea for a mob farm. But that could literally be anything. Like something grand, maybe something tall. I mean, it has to be tall for the mob drops, or we need some space in between for a spawning platform. What if we just make it a landmark somewhere? A monument maybe? We could just make it a tower again. Or why not just both? A tower-like monument, sort of. And if we're already at it, if we're building a monument or a landmark, we gotta create some lore for it, right? So why don't we just build a monument or a tower to reach the gods? That kinda sounds like a plan, no? The only issue is that I have no idea where to build it, but definitely not here. Since the build is gonna be quite lore heavy, I'd like it to be the first cornerstone of an ancient empire in this world that survived and eventually won various kinds of wars. So to answer you guys' questions on if there will be an active civilization in this world, yes, there will be, and we're gonna start with them today. But for now, we're gonna go grab our last few rockets, go to sleep real quick, and then finally head out to find the right location for our mob farm. Which luckily didn't take too long, and I basically found a group of larger kind of islands in the southwest from our starter base. And while the terrain is nowhere near perfect, it's just good enough to alter it and make it our own eventually. So sounds like we found our place to start building our city, or the tower at least, in this episode. To do that though, we'll first have to gather all the resources for the terrain, since I wanted to extend some of the terrain towards the sea a bit in this direction. For now, that means going back next to our starter area, since it's time to gather a bunch of grass blocks for the terrain. And yeah, don't mind them. They're not here at all. I still have no idea where to put them. But yeah, farming grass blocks it is for at least the next hour, since we need about 12 shulkers full of them, I think. So about an hour and 20,000 leaf litter laying around later. We have all the grass together finally, which means we can head on to the next resource that we need. At first I went over to the excavator pit over here, where I get all my stone from, and I got all the different stony kind of blocks, and after that it was time to head over to the desert, or the mesa biome, where I got all the terracotta from that we need. And at last, on a nearby island there was a bunch of gravel, which we also desperately need. So I got that, and with that we have all the materials gathered that we need. So heading home, there was only the crafting and sorting left to do, so the next hour basically just looked like that. Luckily there weren't any too complicated resources needed for the terrain, so it wasn't that bad after all. And with the crafting finally done, we have all the materials together for at least the terrain. So it's time to grab all of the shulkers real quick and get back to our building spot in the southwest. I'm glad it's not too far, so our last 17 rockets should be enough, I think. Finally, being back over here, I just realized that all of the shulkers don't even fit in our inventory. So it really is that much. But that won't keep us from building this terrain, and I already have a rough idea of what I want, more or less. So we won't overdo it with the terrain, and I keep it more or less simple, since I want the main focus to be on the tower. But enough talking for now. It's finally time to build for a bit at least. So you guys enjoy the cinematics. That took a good while, but we do have the terrain in place now. At least without the detailing. And I also already added the transitioning from our custom terrain to the generated terrain underwater, so we don't have to do that anymore. And aside of that, the spawn proving underneath the terrain is also done. And I'm sure you guys were already able to tell, I decided to add another couple of ruins over here. But hey, they do actually have a use for now, since we desperately needed a place to store our shulkers. And they do improve the vibe of the area, which is why I decided to add them. But they're obviously not done yet, since we're gonna do the detailing later on. There won't be much focus on these ruins, since they're just a little side piece to create asymmetry and add to the tower that we're gonna build in a bit, which is gonna be over here, as you hopefully were able to tell already. It's definitely gonna take a while, since it will be quite tall, but that's for later, because for now we have rocks, since adding rocks is definitely the best thing you can do when you run out of ideas. Together with a couple of pathways or roads even, that will be continued later on in the future city. And over here we're gonna detail a little handmade dock for smaller boats later on. It's looking a bit rough for now, but hear me out, it will be quite beautiful later on. Hopefully. Enough with the terrain and yapping though, since we still have a lot to do, as you guys can tell. Since the next thing on the list is gathering the last few materials for the tower that is planned, for which we kind of have to build another farm. A frogite farm to be exact. It's all about the details, guys, remember. And not just for the tower, but the terrain as well. It looks quite bland for now, but that will change. Once we do the detailing, of course. Aside of the missing detailing, I think it turned out quite good though. And the ruins will definitely add a lot more to it in the end. But it's time for a tower now, so we're gonna leave this place as it is for now and head over to our starter base again, since we need a couple of things from there. There should be a few buckets of tadpoles which we need to get frogs, and on the other hand a couple of building materials to build the actual farm, which wasn't too complicated, was it? And with that, the only thing left is a bucket of powdered snow, which we can easily get from a nearby mountain, hopefully. So it's time to go out and find one really quick. Let's just hope there is some powdered snow over there. Is there? Yep, there is. Bucket of snow. There we go. Now we just gotta get out of here, please. I don't really want to be buried alive. Please, please let me out. Thank you. Bro, I love powdered snow so much. It's insane. Anyway, time to get out of here and go to the nether. For the farm, we do need a bastion remnant, of which I luckily do know the location already. It's basically right around the corner. Now it's just time to figure out how not to die, but luckily we can't really get buried alive here, can we? So it shouldn't be too difficult to stay alive, right? At least that's what I thought, until I found myself over here in this situation. But there's no time to die, at least for now. So we're gonna kill the piglins over here real quick and steal their stuff for now. And with that, we hopefully won't be bothered anymore by those fellas, so it's finally time to put a farm into their beloved home. I love playing Intruder. So much fun taking over someone else's home, right? Anyway, the farm is quite simple, so it didn't take too long and I wasn't bothered much. And that was basically all the building for this farm. Not a lot is said. And the magma slimes are happily jumping around, but not for long, since they're still our biggest issue ahead, which is getting the frogs into the farm. So we do have to put a little nether portal over here, aside to the farm, and wait, it won't take too long getting all 3 different frog types. But yeah, on the other side of the portal, it was basically just waiting 20 minutes for the tadpoles to grow up to get the first frog into the boat, and then finally into the farm. But I think we're being a bit interrupted now by a dying villager that drowned. Yeah, I don't know what that was. I guess they were on vacation or something. Anyway, with the first one in, it was time to get the next 2 from the different biomes, so it was basically just waiting again and playing boat transporter, I guess. And after a good while of waiting and transporting both missing frogs, the very last thing we have to do is get the frogs into the little cage or drop thing over here. And then the farm should work for all 3 different types of froglights, I think. Back at our starter base and about 3 stacks of the yellow froglights and a bunch of shulkers full of materials that I crafted for the tower, there's genuinely not much left to do. There's just a couple of materials missing that we need in bulk, like cobblestone, tuff and deepslate, which we can easily get from our excavator pit over here. So it's basically just one more farm run, and then we should have everything that we need to build the tower, for now at least. But don't worry, I won't bother you guys with material gathering anymore, so back at the base, We're having about 38 shulkers full of materials that we need for the tower, basically. I'm really glad to tell you, especially after farming for hours, that we finally have all the materials together. So we're finally free from farming and we can start building the tower right after transferring the shulkers. So let's just grab them and head over to our little spot again. I kid you not. The feeling of finally being able to build the tower in survival after farming all the materials is so damn good. It's such a relief. So no more yapping, just building for now, and I hear you guys later. And that pretty much looks like a tower now, doesn't it? We got the basic stuff done, for now at least. The schematic is in place and we finally have a little mob farm that works. There's still quite some detailing missing though, and not just on the tower but also the ruins over here, since there's no detailing at all yet. Which will change quite soon though, so don't worry guys. But for now, there's quite some stuff to see, since we have multiple parts to the tower. Starting off of the bottom, you can see it sectioned the tower into multiple layers, with the bottom layers being wider than the top ones to give it more stability. I decided to display a couple of dry casts around the tower, since they're kind of portraying life and death in a way, on which this monument and the connected religion kind of is based on. In the middle, I created some sort of great hall, which I decided to make very open for a better atmospheric feeling. In here you can find a couple of memorials with candles and paintings, as well as lecterns, and which I might have to put some fucking quills probably. But yeah, they're mainly for people to pray for their loved ones and carry out their beliefs basically. The bottom half of the tower is based on I don't know how many columns, to be honest, so feel free to count, guys. They're really good to display a solid foundation and stability again. And they add negative shapes or space, which is quite essential for the visuals. Above the third layer of the tower, you can see the mob drop over here, with quite a bunch of resources already. So rockets will finally not be a problem anymore, well, hopefully at least. The top of the tower is still quite boring though at the moment, but that will hopefully change with the detailing, since I do have quite some in mind for the entire tower, which will change it a lot actually. And we also can't forget about the surrounding land over here, it definitely needs a bit of grass. In terms of the detailing though, aside of placing some grass here and there, I took quite some inspiration from Assassin's Creed, since you're able to climb and parkour across buildings in those games. I wanted to make not just the tower climbable, but also the entire future city. That will definitely be a challenge though, especially for buildings of this size. So in order to make that possible for a tower over here, I tried to design some kind of scaffolding for a part of it at least, hoping it will not only make us able to climb the tower, but also add to the aesthetic of the area. It will be mainly on the side with the ruins, so we might even be able to connect them with the tower through the scaffoldings and the detailing around here. Before we do that though, there's one last thing that I wanted to do before all of the detailing, which is adding another farm above the mob farm. In this case, it would be a basic sugarcane farm. I mean, if we're already AFKing over here to get the gunpowder, why not for the paper as well? A basic sugarcane farm it is. I like the ones with pistons and observers. I'm sure all of you guys have seen those, so there's no need to further explain. And with just a couple of minutes building over here, we have our first sugarcane farm. Now we just gotta get 2 more and we should be set for a while. Sadly, there was no space for the third one to be complete, so I had to cut off a bit, but with the last one and the collection system over here added, it's all good and running. It's not the best, but it does job, which means we can head over and focus on the important parts now. If I didn't just have to capture a couple of pillagers in boats. But hey, there might be great detailing later on. Heading over to the bow milling to get that out of the way first, which shouldn't take too long hopefully. If there weren't even more pillagers spawning over here. Great. But hey, they might even become future citizens one day. Who knows? With the grass added, it's a bit better now finally, and doesn't feel as dry. I also added a couple of fences around the pathways to kind of enhance them and lead the way. That's generally just spawning more and more pillagers. It's so insane. I'm starting to feel like they're having some sort of complex. But anyway, it's finally time to do the actual detail now. Starting off with the smaller ruins over here, I wanted to add some storage as well as scaffoldings to make it feel more alive. So I'd actually say we just jump straight into it and get some stuff done. As you can see, there's really not too much going on. I just added the little storage part on the floor over here, in which we can store our empty shulkers and our leftover materials from the building, and the scaffolding which you can actually climb on to the very top, with just a bit of help from the wind chargers, incorporated into a pulley, basically, which is based on another Assassin's Creed mechanic where you cut through a rope and get lifted by a counterweight, usually a sandsack. So basically a different kind of pulley. But since there's no rope, you can cut the Minecraft wind chargers have to do it for now. And we might have to use them again for even larger distances on the tower, which we still have to climb. Aside of that, we have a little hanging bridge connecting the 2 buildings, which basically makes the entire area of the little ruins complete. Which means we can head over to the larger scaffolding part on this side of the tower. It's definitely gonna be a bit larger than the first scaffolding over here, since there's a lot more height that we have to travel in order to get to the top. So starting off, we definitely need a larger foundation or a wider one. And since it's a construction site, we have some resources gathered around the area, together with some storage space and shelter as well. Since I want multiple ways to get on top of the platforms, I decided to add a staircase besides the ladders that will be added. Overall, I'm heavily working with fences, trapdoors and shelves, since those pretty much give you enough options to create jump ups and ladders when wanted, with enough variety of course. And that doesn't really look too bad so far. I'm trying to go for a kind of messy look for the scaffolding, and I want a bunch of stuff going on, so we're having multiple platforms on different elevations and different jump ups, kind of, from platform to platform, as well as different kinds of ladders spread across the entire scaffolding. And since signs definitely help a lot with the visuals, I'm spreading them across the entire build a little. The higher we get, the thinner the scaffolding turns out to be. And at some point I went over to adding a bit of foliage to the tower instead, and started carving into the walls a bit to make the tower climbable. And after adding another wind charge pulley, there was nothing left to do for the scaffolding. So I went over and detailed the room at the top of the tower, which I kept quite simple since it was only supposed to be used to create gunpowder and for more little rituals, until I realized that we don't have any entrance or exit for the sugarcane farm. So we had to do that. And I went over to create a little floor entrance and exit powered by wind charges basically. Luckily it wasn't too complicated, and even I was able to figure out how to build this little door, and it works pretty much fine. When you're at the bottom, you just use the button and the pistons and the wind charges do their job. And at the top you have a button right next to the door, or another hidden button in this brewing stand over here. Either of them work, and you should have enough time for both of them to be honest, but the one right next to the door is just a bit more convenient. And that's pretty much it for now. Might do the interior of the sugarcane farm eventually and create a little room for it and whatsoever, but it's not really needed at the moment. So we're going over to the next Assassin's Creed mechanic, which is called Leap of Fate, where you usually jump into some sort of hay bale or water from a high place like this one. So if you have feather falling forward boots, you will survive this jump over here with around 3 hearts, as long as you hit the hay bale or water. Otherwise you probably just die. And after adding another hay carriage over here, we can finally have fun breaking our legs on this side as well. On the other hand, the last few things, we're adding a couple of lampposts next to the pathways and spawn through most of the area, as well as adding a bit more foliage. Basically just a couple of bushes here and there and some firefly bushes next to the sea. And together with our new little villagers roaming around over here, that's all for today's video actually. I feel like it turned out quite good, and it's a great addition to the world. And aside of finally having a mob farm, I probably like the fact that we can climb the tower the most. Like, having a build you can actually interact with is the best in my opinion. But you guys let me know in the comments what you like the most. And please tell me the villagers don't just spoil my world this often, since it can't be real. And as the day ends, we're coming to an end with this little project. I will have to be honest though, starting a new project can be quite scary. It often feels like standing in front of an empty canvas with literally no color inside. Especially in grander scale, it might just feel impossible. In my case, when starting to build a new city, you have to keep a lot of things in mind. It's not just putting down a few buildings and call it a day. Or is it? I mean, aside of planning infrastructures, water systems and massive landmarks, you just have to start. So it kinda is just putting a few buildings down and letting the city develop with time. And to put it into different words, to make something great, you have to make it exist first. And with that being said, yes, we're starting to build our city today, and don't worry, we're not calling it a day yet. There's still a bunch to do aside of these few buildings and docks over here. Having an ocean right next to us, as well as a bunch of rivers crossing through the land, we're gonna take advantage of it and make it a little harbor city. So the city will be heavily inspired by Venice, as well as the city of Bravos from Game of Thrones. So after quickly grabbing some materials, we don't just have more buildings and docks to add in today's video, but also the first bridge to get to the other side of the river over here. And since there's no time to waste really, I'm starting right away with the dock extension itself, adding a few more smaller boats and some more detail here and there basically. And while doing so, I realized that the design I had for the walls over here was total garbage, since it blends in too much with the stone used in the buildings, so I changed it all over again, basically building it out of darker blocks and moss to give it a weathered and kind of wet look. And the same goes for the floor. I changed it to a more dirty, muddy kind of look, since I'm kinda guilty of using too much stone and grey, I'll be honest. But it does look quite a bit better now with the added contrast. Coming over to this side over here, we still have quite some space to fill with buildings until it's time for the first bridge in the area over there. So we basically have to come up with 2 to 3 buildings that make sense in this area of the harbor. So I might just add another crane and some sort of warehouse for the resources that are being stored in this sector of the harbor. I mean, even though the docks over here are small and not really meant for trading ships, you still have to carry around the cargo in some way. So I'm putting a little crane over here, not just to transport the cargo around, but also to make the area feel more alive and actually used. And to not make it too boring, I'm making it a bit diagonal. After a quick break, I went ahead and started with the storage room, which will be beneath the building that functions as housing for the harbor workers. And since there was some leftover space in between, I decided to squeeze another little building in for even more housing. And that is pretty much the number one solution if you don't know what to put somewhere in a city. Just add another building for housing. And it doesn't even have to be as detailed or big, since the amount of buildings in a city will actually do a lot in the end. And yeah, I haven't done the part above the storage room over here. But yeah, I guess we go straight back to building. And you could kinda say I'm obsessed with towers, so aside of tons of bridges, we'll also add quite some towers to the cityscape with time. This one in particular sort of functions as watchtower for the harbor workers to see when ships arrive, so they can prepare themselves in time to work with the cargo that has to be handled basically. And I'd say that didn't turn out too bad. With 2 buildings added, we have a lot more housing for the workers. On the other hand, we have the crane together with the storage room that gives them some sort of workplace as well. And while the 2 buildings might not be the most aesthetic and detailed on their own, I think they might just blend into the cityscape quite well. And the crane's quite fancy. In terms of the interior, I've added some basic ones already that we might alter a bit in the future to make it more fancy, but for now it makes sense since they're simple apartments sort of, and they don't need much, technically. I mean, they're poor harbor workers, they ain't got money, or at least not much. So moving on from these 2 buildings, we're having another simple build for housing right next to it, connected with a little bridge or gate to the tavern or inn over here. And last but not least, a little warehouse to store boats and to let them into the water again over here basically. So nothing crazy really, kept it quite simple. And aside of that, I've added some scaffoldings again. So yeah, you're gonna be able to parkour across the city again and climb on top of the buildings. I mean, as much as you're able to in Minecraft at least. Leaving this part behind for a bit, you can see that there's still enough space for quite a large building over here though. So it's time to come up with a building for that space as well as the bridge that I had in mind right next to it, where the river is a bit more narrow basically. Luckily, we do still have quite a shulker monster at our ruins over here, so I'll organize them real quick and then we should have most of the materials that we need, hopefully. So after 20 minutes of sorting and grabbing some materials from here and there, we actually should have everything we need. Having all the materials together now, I gotta decide what to build first, and I actually think I'll put the bridge down first to see how much space there is left for the building between the bridge and the houses, so we can adjust that building to the space basically. So yeah, it's time to build the bridge. Having the bridge pretty much done, we can more or less see now how much space we have left for the building over here. So it's time to come up with some kind of idea for the building now. Looking from the top of the bridge, we have a kind of rectangular shape. It's not even that small, so I'd say we can go for a kind of larger build. I was thinking about adding a bell tower maybe. I'm not quite sure about the exact use of the entire build. I might just gonna be purely aesthetic, so I'll probably use some Elytra blocks, but you see for yourself. Doesn't look too bad after finally having the building in place, right? The only issue is the backside. We're not gonna talk about it. We're just gonna ignore that part for now and focus on the important stuff, which is the interior, for which I wanted to make some sort of altar or a statue over here maybe. And even though the building looks kinda like a church, I don't really want it to be one, since it's way too small, if we gotta be honest. So we definitely gotta figure out another use for it later. But for now, it's time to get some lights into place, so we can start building the little statues. Since I might just put another two into the corners here. I mean, if they turn out bad, I can still change it, right? And on the other hand, statues are quite difficult, and I barely ever made any. So I'm sure y'all will forgive me if they turn out not as good. And I mean, on this scale, you can't really expect that much. I mean, it's not much space. Onto the second one, I gotta say they're not too bad. I mean, a bit goofy, but for the scale, it's okay. Last but not least, the middle one over here, for which we have a bit more space, but I can't promise anything. Alright, like, it will probably be a bit goofy again. I have to be honest though, sculpting statues has always been one of my weak links. Never really liked it. So if I ever make a good statue, you guys gotta be proud, okay? I definitely want to build some statues though, especially in larger scale, but that's for another video. Definitely not today. And with that being said, I think we're kinda done with this beautiful statue. I might change it at some point, but for now, this gotta do, not gonna lie. I mean, the small ones aren't that bad. They're like white copper golems, sort of. Well, maybe I'm just hallucinating, but yeah. We're gonna head on to the next room over here though, for which I thought a little library could be nice. So let's see what we can do over here. And that's not too bad. Just gotta light up the candles over here real quick. I mean, it's quite dark at the moment, so we gotta get in some light. Also can't forget the ones in the library. Yeah, okay, never mind. Back to adding a few paintings at the entrance, and now finally finishing the light part inside of here. And it doesn't look too bad in my opinion. I'm just getting used to using too many candles though, not gonna lie. Like, the lanterns are just way too bright sometimes. Like, if you want some good atmosphere, you just have to use candles. And with that being said, gotta quickly add a bit more foliage in here for the atmosphere. I don't know, foliage just makes everything better, so quickly adding some grass around the statue over here as well. And yeah. Seems like we're gonna switch out the candles at the top with lanterns. So much to say the candles are always better, huh? I think that's alright now, but I'm still not too happy with the foliage, not gonna lie. So we gotta do some here and there, kinda. Maybe some vines could work too. Adding some leaves in this area as well, and that should be pretty much alright. Some little flowers over here, and last but not least, I wanted to make some footprints out of leaf litter. Basically shaping the path the people took coming from outside. I mean, it kinda simulates the footprints as well as the dirt that they carry in with them, so yeah, the floor was just too empty in my opinion, so I wanted to change that. And together with the vines in place, I think we're pretty much done in here actually. I mean, it's not the fanciest, but that's the job kinda, so... We're just not ever gonna talk about the bell in the bell tower that you're not able to reach without an elytra, because it's just there. I didn't want to ruin the aesthetics by a ladder that leads up there basically, so I might just put one on the outside. I don't know, but for now the library and the building are pretty much done. And the bell tower is actually quite useful, since the harbor workers do have to know the time. I mean, they gotta know when their work starts, right? Coming over to the docks, I gotta say, also fits them pretty well. And looks quite sick too, so for now I'm kinda happy with it. So I think we can move to the other side of the river now with buildings, since there are a couple of buildings that I want to add over there. Alrighty, that's not too bad. It's actually coming together now with the buildings that we already have over here. And it's slowly feeling like a future city. Kinda. I mean, nonetheless, there's still a lot to do with this building, don't get me wrong. Since it's just a filler building for now, with no actual interior. But I don't want to do that today, since I want to put the focus on another build for now. Mainly because we're still at the start of this world, we don't have as many farms yet. Which is why I want to tackle another little farm for the end of the video today. And of course, we can't forget the docks on this side too. But in terms of the farms, I wanted to add an automatic wheat and carrot farm over here, covered by a bakery, with water access to be precise. So people are able to reach at least one vendor by boat. I mean, if we're already building canals and tons of bridges and boats, we also gotta be able to use them, right? So it just makes sense. But yeah, for now, it's time to introduce this world to legalized slavery today. And since we still have quite some resources, for once, we're not the slaves today, slaving away farming shulkers full of materials. But the villagers are gonna take our place. So before we start building, we have to get them over here. So crafting a couple of boats it is, and making our way over to the village over here, where I successfully bred the villagers for today. Quite sure they have been happy over here for quite a while. I mean, look at them. They're so joyous. I mean, I'd never keep them in some kind of basement where I don't want to be. Like, trust me, they like it here. But it's sadly time to kidnap them. I mean, just a couple. Like 6 probably for now, but we actually might need 7, so I'll probably just get that one later. So let the boat action begin, I guess. For now, I'm gonna just get them over here into the water, and then we can drive them over to the city later. I mean, we basically have a river right to the city, so... But for now, we're just gonna get all of them over here real quick, and then we're gonna craft some leads to get all of them over to the city. So, quickly crafting the leads over here, and then we're gonna put a lead on each and every single one of the boats, except for one. And then it's time for a little trip with our new friends, with our new friends, of course, because we get some beautiful shops over there in the city. And they're gonna be living in the same building as well, so they won't be split apart. I mean, that's something at least. Now we're just gonna remove the leads over here, and never mind. How did the boats get down there? I mean, luckily the villagers can swim, so they didn't die, but that's weird. Now the only issue is that we have 2 in one boat, but never mind, that just made it worse. Okay, we're just gonna leave it as it is for now, and then we can do that later. Because for now, it's a time to build again, since we do have all the villagers here and the materials that we need to at least build a couple of docks and hopefully all of the bakery as well. And if we don't, we just can get a couple of more resources, so that's fine. So quickly grabbing the shulkers, and then it's building time. So added a couple of docks for now, and it's not looking too bad. We got a couple of boats as well over here and there. And yeah, it's looking all good so far. Except for that. Yeah. I don't think I have to say anything about that. Like, shit happens. We're just gonna turn them back into villagers once we've built the bakery. So yeah, at least the boats are looking alright. And I'd say we just hop back straight into building. So we can put the farms into the bakery and let them start running for resources. Which will be completely legal labor, and no slavery at all, of course. Totally. that pretty much concludes the little bakery over here. Now the only issue left is the villagers, so we gotta go back to our starter base real quick to get the potions and the golden apples. Back at home, I think we should have everything we need spread out in our storage system, so it's basically just brewing them real quick. I mean, luckily it's not too difficult. I mean, only need a fermented spider eye as well as 1 gunpowder, I think, and some golden apples, of course. Now we're just gonna make them into splash potions real quick, and now we're done. Now we're just gonna go back to the villagers and use the potions and golden apples on them and wait like 5 minutes, I think. I don't remember how long it was, to be honest, so don't come at me. So now we just gotta get over to the boat over there. Okay, never mind. We're not gonna talk about it. We're just gonna use the potions real quick, and there we go. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and the last one. There we go. Now we're just gonna wait a bit, and then we can start with the beautiful legal labor in the city. And in the meantime, it's time to put a couple rails down to get the villagers into the building later on. I mean, I'm just using rails because it's the most convenient to me, since there's quite a few blocks around that the villagers would run to get their job, which I really don't want to deal with, because that would be quite annoying and it would waste a lot of time. And even with the rails, the next 20 minutes are just gonna look like this, so I spare you guys the pain. I really can't wait to make a villager trading hall. It's gonna be lots of fun and pain. But having the last one at the bottom in place is just 2 for the farms and 1 for the boat side, I think. So it's not too bad. It's not too bad. And with this one, we're finally having all of them in place now. In a sec. Yes, there it is. Now we're just gonna remove the blocks and we're finally done with the villagers. Having them in place and the farms running, we basically have enough passive packed mud and food for most of the time at least. We don't have to do anything for it. And that means no more robbing villages for their hay bales, so I'd say it's a win for all of us, kinda. But yeah, that was pretty much the last thing we had to do today. And over here we can just trade with the villagers, and back there are the chests where we can get the wheat and the carrots from the farms, which are basically 1 floor above us. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And with nothing left to do, I'd say we're at the end of the video for now. And I just want to tell you guys again, if you ever find yourself stuck at building, not even able to start maybe because of your perfectionism, it doesn't really matter how you start. Like, it doesn't have to be great or perfect from the beginning. It just matters that you do start and make something exist at first. And with that, the first 1000 days are coming to an end. And while we're nowhere near where I want to be with this world, I'd say it's been a great start. And I hope you guys are excited for more, because more will definitely come. I really appreciate your guys' support, and a special thanks to my patrons here on the screen. Hope you all enjoyed the video, and with that being said, you can find the world download and Discord link in the description. And I guess I'll see you next time.